Hello everyone. Today I will be presenting you muscles of the trunk for first course of general medicine. The muscles of the trunk are basically divided into three groups: back muscles, thorax muscles, and abdominal muscles. So let's begin with the muscles of the back. It has two layers: superficial and deep. The superficial muscles of the back are as follows: trapezius muscle, latissimus dorsi muscle, levator scapulae muscle, rhomboid minor muscle, rhomboid major muscle, serratus posterior superior muscle, and serratus posterior inferior muscle. Let's begin with the first muscle for this layer, trapezius muscle. The superior part of this muscle originates at the superior nuchal line and external occipital protuberance. The medial part of this muscle originates at the nuchal ligament, and the inferior part originates at the spinous processes from C7 to T12. The superior part attaches at the lateral third of the clavicle. The medial part attaches at the acromion, and the inferior part attaches at the spine of the scapula. Now let's look at the actions performed by this muscle. Adduction of scapula, extension of vertebral column, elevation of scapula, depression of scapula, rotation of scapula, lateral flexion of the vertebral column, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Latissimus dorsi muscle. It originates at the spinous processes of 6th to 12th thoracic vertebrae. 6th to 12th thoracic vertebrae. Sacrum, iliac crest, and 10th to 12th ribs. Here. It is attached to the floor of the bicipital groove. Now let's look at the actions performed by the latissimus dorsi muscle. Extension of humerus, adduction of humerus, internal rotation of humerus, lateral flexion of the trunk, anterior tilt of the trunk. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. This is the latissimus dorsi muscle. Levator scapulae muscle. It originates at the transverse processes from C1 to C4 and attaches at the superior part of the medial border of the scapula. Now let's look at the actions performed by this muscle. Elevation of scapula, lateral flexion of vertebral column, ipsilateral rotation of the vertebral column, ipsilateral means towards the same side, extension of the vertebral column, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Rhomboid minor muscle. It originates at the transverse processes from C1 to C4 and attaches at the superior part of the middle border of the scapula. Actions performed by this muscle: adduction of scapula, elevation plus rotation of scapula, and this is what it looks like on the cadaver, the rhomboid minor muscle. Rhomboid major muscle. It originates at the spinous processes from T2 to T5 and attaches at the medial border of the scapula below the spine. Actions performed by this muscle: adduction of scapula, elevation plus rotation of scapula, this is what rhomboid major muscle looks like in the cadaver. Serratus posterior superior muscle. It originates at the inferior part of the nuchal ligament, spinous processes and supraspinous ligaments from C7 to T3. It attaches at the superior border of the second to fifth ribs, immediately lateral to their angles. Actions performed by this muscle: elevation of ribs, this is what serratus posterior superior muscle looks like on the cadaver. Serratus posterior inferior muscle. It originates at the spinous processes and supraspinous ligaments from T11 to L3 and attaches at the superior border of the ribs 9th to 12th, immediately lateral to their angles. Actions performed by this muscle: depression of the ribs, and this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Now let's move on to the deep muscles of the back. This layer of muscles have various groups with different subgroups: splenius capitis, splenius cervicis, erector spinae with spinalis, longissimus and iliacostalis, transversus spinalis with rotatoris, multifidus and semispinalis, intertransversary with anterior cervical, lateral posterior cervical, lateralis lumborum and medial lumbar, interspinalis with interspinalis cervicis, interspinalis thoracis, and interspinalis lumborum, suboccipital with rectus capitis posterior minor, rectus capitis posterior major, obliquus capitis superior, and obliquus capitis inferior. Let's move on to the first muscle of the deep layer of the back. It originates at the lower half of the nuchal ligament and spinous processes of C7 to T4. It attaches at the mastoid process and lateral part of the occipital bone below the superior nuchal line. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, ipsilateral rotation of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Splenius cervicis muscle. It originates at the spinous processes of T3 to T6 and attaches at the transverse processes of C1 to C3. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, ipsilateral rotation of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Now let's move on to the next group of the deep muscles of the back. These subgroups include various muscles. Spinalis include spinalis capitis, spinalis cervicis, and spinalis thoracis. Longissimus includes longissimus capitis, longissimus cervicis, and longissimus thoracis. Iliocostalis includes iliocostalis cervicis, iliocostalis dorsi, and iliocostalis lumborum. Now let's move on to the first muscle of this group. It originates at the spinous processes of C7 to T1 vertebrae and attaches at the midline of the occipital bone. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column and head, lateral flexion of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Spinalis cervicis muscle. It originates at the lower part of the nuchal ligament and spinous process of C7 and attaches at the spinous process of C2, which is also known as the axis. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Spinalis thoracis muscle. It originates at the spinous processes of T10 to L2 and attaches at the spinous processes of T1 to T8. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Longissimus capitis muscle. It originates at the transverse processes of 4 or 5 upper thoracic vertebrae and articular process of the last 3 cervical vertebrae. It attaches at the posterior border of the mastoid. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Longissimus cervicis muscle. It originates at the transverse processes of 4 or 5 upper thoracic vertebrae and attaches at the transverse processes of C2 to C6. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column. Longissimus cervicis on cadaver. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Longissimus thoracis muscle. It fuses with the iliocostals at the lumbar level, sacrum, spinous process of the lumbar vertebrae of the supras and the supraspinous ligaments and iliac crest. It attaches at the transverse processes of all thoracic vertebrae and costal tubercles of the 2nd to 12th ribs. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column, extension of vertebral column and anterior tilt of the pelvis. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Iliocostalis cervicis muscle. It originates at the angle of 3rd to 6th ribs and attaches at the transverse processes of 4th to 6th cervical vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Iliocostalis dorsi muscle, also known as iliocostalis thoracis muscle. It originates at the angle of the 7th to 12th ribs and attaches at the angles of the 1st to 6th ribs and spinous processes of the 7th cervical vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Iliocostalis lumborum muscle. It originates at the sacrum, spinous processes of the lumbar vertebrae and the supraspinous ligaments and iliac crest. Supraspinous ligaments and iliac crest. It attaches at the angle of the 7th to 12th ribs. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, anterior tilt of the pelvis, lateral flexion of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Now let's move on to the next group of the deep muscles of the back. It has rotatorus, which has longus and brevis, multifidus again with longus and brevis, semispinalis with semispinalis capitis, semispinalis cervicis and semispinalis thoracis. Now let's begin with the first muscle of this group. It originates at the transverse process of the thoracic vertebrae and attaches at the spinous process of the thoracic vertebrae. Now, as mentioned before, it has two variations, brevis and longus. The brevis attaches to the nearest vertebrae, whereas the longus attaches after passing through one vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, contralateral rotation of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Multifidus muscle. It originates at the sacrum, origin of the erector spinae, posterior superior iliac spine, mammillary processes of the lumbar vertebrae, transverse process of the thoracic vertebrae, and articular process of the C4 to C7. It attaches at the spinous processes of C2 to L5. Same as rotator it has two variations, brevis and longus. The brevis attaches to the nearest vertebrae. The longus attaches after passing through four vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column, contralateral rotation of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Semispinalis capitis muscle. It originates at the articular processes of C4 to C6 and transverse processes of C7 to T6. It attaches at the medial area between the superior and inferior nuchal lines of the occipital bone. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column, contralateral rotation of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Semispinalis cervicis. It originates at the transverse processes of C7 to T6 and attaches at the spinous processes of C2 to C5. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column, contralateral rotation of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Semispinalis thoracis muscle. It originates at the transverse processes of T6 to T10 and attaches at the spinous processes of C6 to T4. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column, contralateral rotation of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Let's move on to the next group of the muscles, which are the intertransversory. These group include anterior cervical intertransversory, lateral posterior cervical intertransversory, intertransversory lateralis lumborum, and medial lumbar intertransversory. Anterior cervical intertransversory muscle. It originates at the transverse processes of the cervical vertebrae and attaches at the transverse processes of the adjacent cervical vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle: lateral flexion of the vertebral column, lateral posterior cervical intertransversory muscle. It originates at the transverse processes of the cervical vertebrae and attaches at the transverse processes of the adjacent cervical vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle: lateral flexion of the vertebral column, intertransversi lateralis lumborum. It originates at the transverse process of the lumbar vertebrae and attaches at the transverse process of the adjacent lumbar vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle: lateral flexion of the vertebral column, medial lumbar intertransversory muscle. It originates at the transverse process of the lumbar vertebrae and attaches at the transverse process of the adjacent lumbar vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle: lateral flexion of the vertebral column, now let's move on to the next group of the muscles. This group includes interspinalis cervicis, interspinalis thoracis, and interspinalis lumborum. Interspinalis cervicis muscle. It originates at the spinous processes of the cervical vertebrae and attaches at the spinous processes of the adjacent cervical vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of the vertebral column, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Interspinalis thoracis muscle. It originates at the superior aspect of the spinous processes of vertebrae T2, T11 and T12 and attaches at the inferior aspects of the spinous processes of vertebrae T1, T10 and T11. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of the spine, interspinalis lumborum muscle. It originates at the spinous processes of the lumbar vertebrae and attaches at the spinous processes of the adjacent lumbar vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of the vertebral column, now let's move on to the next group of the muscles, suboccipital muscles. This group includes rectus capitis posterior minor muscle, rectus capitis posterior major muscle, obliquus capitis superior and obliquus capitis inferior. Rectus capitis posterior minor muscle. It originates at the spinous processes of the atlas, which is the first cervical vertebrae, and attaches at the medial portion of the occipital bone below the inferior nuchal line. Actions performed by this muscle: extension of the atlanto-occipital joint, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Rectus capitis posterior major muscle. It originates at the spinous process of the axis, which is the second cervical vertebrae. It attaches at the lateral portion of the occipital bone below the inferior nuchal line. Actions performed by this muscle are: ipsilateral rotation of the head, extension of the head. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Obliquus capitis superior muscle. It originates at the transverse process of the atlas, which is the first cervical vertebrae, and attaches at the occipital bone between the superior and inferior nuchal line. Actions performed by this muscle are: contralateral extension of the atlanto-occipital joint, extension of the atlanto-occipital joint. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. obliquus capitis inferior muscle. It originates at the transverse process of the axis, which is the second cervical vertebrae, and attaches at the transverse process of the atlas, which is the first cervical vertebrae. Actions performed by this muscle are extension of the vertebral column, ipsilateral rotation of the vertebral column, lateral flexion of the vertebral column. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Now let's move on to the fascia of the back. The superficial fascia of the back, which covers the trapezius and latissimus dorsi muscle, is not markedly developed, in which case you can't properly see it on the cadaver. The thoracolumbar fascia, which covers the deep muscles of the back, is developed quite well, especially in the lumbar region, where it is divided into superficial and deep laminae. Its superficial lamina is attached medially to the apexes of the spinous processes of all thoracic and lumbar vertebrae, to the medial sacral crest, and laterally to the angles of the ribs. The deep lamina of this fascia medially attaches to the transverse processes of lumbar vertebrae, at the top to the 12th rib, and at the bottom to the iliac crest. The two plates fuse together near the lateral edge of the erector muscle of the spine, forming a fascial sheath around this muscle. On the dorsal region of the neck, between its muscle, are the laminae of the nuchal fascia. As you can see here, this is the lumbodorsal or the thoracodorsal fascia, or the thoracolumbar fascia. Now let's move on to the muscles of the thorax. Same as muscles of the back, it has two layers, superficial and deep. Now let's move on to the superficial muscles of the back. This layer of muscles has the following muscles: pectoralis major, pectoralis minor, subclavius, and serratus anterior. Pectoralis major. It originates at the clavicular sternal half of the clavicle, manubrium, body of the sternum, and costal cartilages first to fourth, and the sheath of the rectus abdominis muscle. It attaches to the crest of the greater tubercle of the humerus. Actions performed by this muscle are internal rotation of the humerus, adduction of the humerus, horizontal adduction of the humerus, inspiration. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Pectoralis minor muscle. It originates from 3rd to 5th ribs near the chondrocostal junction and attaches at the vertex of the coracoid process, which is at the apex. Actions performed by this muscle are depression plus anterior tilt of the scapula, inspiration. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Subclavius muscle. It originates at the first rib next to the chondrocostal articulation. It attaches at the inferior surface of the middle third of the clavicle. Actions performed by this muscle are depression of the clavicle, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Serratus anterior. It originates at the external aspect of the first 8 to 9 ribs and deep fascia overlying the related intercostal spaces. It attaches at the medial border of the scapula, costal side. Actions performed by this muscle are protraction of scapula, elevation plus rotation of scapula, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Now let's move on to the deep muscles of the back. This layer includes external intercostal muscles, internal intercostal muscles, innermost intercostal muscles, transversus thoracis muscle, subcostal muscle, and levatorus costarum. External intercostal muscles. It originates at the external intercostal and attaches at the superior border of the inferior rib. Actions performed by this muscle are inspiration, internal intercostal muscles. It originates at the lateral border of the costal groove of the upper rib and attaches at the superior border of the inferior rib. Actions performed by this muscle are expiration, on the cadaver. This is the internal intercostal muscles and these are the external intercostal muscles. Innermost intercostal muscles. It originates at the medial border of the costal groove of the upper rib and attaches at the superior border of the inferior rib. Medial part. Actions performed by this muscle are expiration, transversus thoracis muscle. It originates at the inferior border and internal aspect of the second to sixth rib and attaches at the posterior aspect of the sternum and third to seventh costal cartilages. Actions performed by this muscle are expiration, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Subcostal muscle. It originates at the internal aspect of the last ribs near the angle and attaches at the internal aspect of the second or third rib superior to the origin. Actions performed by this muscle are expiration, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Levatorus costarum. It originates from a transverse process starting from the 7th cervical vertebrae and ending at the 11th thoracic vertebrae and attaches to the contiguous rib below. Actions performed by this muscle are elevation of the ribs. It elevates the ribs. Now let's move on to the fascia of the thorax. The superficial fascia of the chest is weakly developed. The pectoral fascia has deep and superficial laminae. The superficial lamina covers the pectoralis major muscle in the front. It attaches medially to the edge of the sternum. Laterally, it continues into the deltoid fascia. At the bottom, it becomes the axillary fascia and at the top, it attaches to the clavicle. The deep lamina of the pectoral fascia separates the pectoralis major and pectoralis minor muscle forming a facial sheath of the former. Laterally and at the bottom, the deep lamina of the pectoral fascia merges with the superficial lamina. Between the clavicle and the upper edge of the pectoralis minor, the deep lamina has a thickening called the clavipectoral fascia. Beneath this fascia are ribs and external intercostal muscles. The inside of the thorax is lined by the endothoracic fascia. It covers the internal intercostal muscles, transverse thoracic muscles, internal surface of the ribs, and the diaphragm. As you can see here, this is the deep cervical fascia, this is the deltoid fascia, and this is the pectoral fascia. Now let's move on to diaphragm. The overall origins of the diaphragm are as follows. Muscular or tendinous fibers in all the anatomical elements that form the inferior costal orifice, xiphoid process of the sternum, costal edges of the thoracic wall, extremes of the 11th and 12th ribs, and the diaphragmatic pillars of the diaphragm, which are these two, the right one at the body of L1 to L4 and the left one at L1 to L3. Now the diaphragm has three parts, namely the lumbar part, the costal part, and the sternal part. This here is the lumbar part. From here to here is the costal part, and this here is the sternal part. These parts have their own specific origins. The lumbar part originates by means of a long tendon from the anterior surface of the bodies of the first to fourth lumbar vertebrae and from two tendinous ligaments which are thickenings of the thoracolumbar fascia. The medial peduncle of this part is formed by the right and left crura of the diaphragm. The intermediate peduncle passes above the psoas major muscle. The lateral peduncle runs above the quadratus lumborum from the transverse process of the first lumbar vertebrae. The costal part originates by separate lips from the inner surfaces of the cartilages from 7th to 12th ribs. The sternal part arises from the posterior surface of the sternal xiphoid process. Now let's move on to the attachments of these parts. In the lumbar part, the medial peduncle attaches in the medial peduncle, the right and left crura connect to form an arch. The intermediate peduncle stretches between the body of the first and second lumbar vertebrae and its transverse processes. Lateral peduncle attaches to the free border of the 12th rib. The costal part attaches to the tendinous center of the diaphragm, and the sternal part also attaches to the tendinous center of the diaphragm. The medial arcuate ligament begins from the lateral surface of the L1 vertebrae and attaches to the transverse process of the L2 vertebra. This ligament is stretched over the psoas major muscle. The lateral arcuate ligament stretches between the apex of L1 vertebra and rib the 12th. It is situated in front of the lumbar quadrate muscle. The two peduncles of the lumbar part of the diaphragm cross each other on the level of L1 vertebrae, forming the aortic hiatus that serves as a passage for the aorta and the thoracic duct. The edges of this opening are limited by fibrous lamina called the middle arcuate ligament, which protects the vessels which pass through this opening from compression. Above and somewhat left of the aortic hiatus in the lumbar part of the diaphragm is the esophageal hiatus. Which is passage for the esophagus and the vagus nerve. Other vessels and nerve also pass between other fascicles of the lumbar part, which are the hemiazygous and left greater splanchnic nerve, which passes from this place. The left sympathetic trunk and left lesser splanchnic nerve, which passes like just below the hemiazygous and left greater splanchnic. The azygous and right greater splanchnic pass from this place, which is the intermediate peduncle, and the right sympathetic trunk and right lesser splanchnic nerve pass from this place, This is again the intermediate peduncle. The diaphragm has weak places in which muscle fibers are absent, and the organs of the abdominal and thoracic cavities are separated only by the endoabdominal and endothoracic fasciae. These are the paired lumbocostal and sternocostal triangles. The lumbocostal triangle is situated between lumbar and costal parts of the diaphragm. The sternocostal triangle is smaller and is situated between sternal and costal parts of the diaphragm. These triangles often become site of diaphragmatic hernias. Now let's look at the actions performed by the diaphragm. Inspiration. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Now let's begin with the last group for muscles of the trunk, muscles of the abdomen. The muscles of this group are external oblique muscle, internal oblique muscle, transversus abdominis, rectus abdominis, pyramidalis muscle, and quadratus lumborum. External oblique muscle. It originates at the external aspects of the 5th to 12th ribs and attaches at the lateral lip of iliac crest and linea alba aponeurosis. Actions performed by this muscle are contralateral rotation of the trunk, lateral flexion of the trunk, flexion of the trunk, posterior tilt of the pelvis. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Internal oblique muscle. It originates at the thoracolumbar fascia, iliac crest, and lateral 2/3 of the inguinal ligament. It attaches to the inferior border of the 10th to 12th ribs. Aponeurosis of linea alba, pubic crest, and pectineal line. Actions performed by this muscle are ipsilateral rotation of the trunk, lateral flexion of the trunk, flexion of the trunk, posterior tilt of pelvis. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Transversus abdominis muscle. It originates at the thoracolumbar fascia, inner lip of the iliac crest, lateral 1/3 of the inguinal ligament, and 7th to 12th costal cartilages. It attaches at the aponeurosis of the linea alba, pubic crest, and pectineal line. Actions performed by this muscle are contraction, this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Rectus abdominis muscle. It originates at the crest of the pubis, tubercle of the pubis, and pubic symphysis. It attaches to the costal cartilages from 5th to 7th ribs. Actions performed by this muscle are flexion of the trunk, posterior tilt of the pelvis, and this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Pyramidalis muscle. It originates at the anterior aspect of the pubis and attaches to the linea alba. Actions performed by this muscle are flexion, and this is what it looks like on the cadaver. Quadratus lumborum muscle. It originates at the transverse process of L5, iliolumbar ligament, and iliac crest. It attaches to the transverse processes of L1 to L4 and inferior border of the last rib. Actions performed by this muscle are lateral flexion of the trunk, inspiration. This is what it looks like on the cadaver. Now let's move on to the fascia of the abdomen. The superficial fascia separates the abdominal muscles from the subcutaneous fatty tissue. The proper fascia of the abdomen consists of several laminae distributed among the muscular layers of the abdomen. The best developed of these is the lamina, which covers the external oblique muscle. The transversalis fascia covers the anterior and lateral walls of the abdominal cavity, making up a large part of the intra-abdominal fascia. On the inside of the abdomen, the transversalis fascia is covered by the peritoneum. Here you can see the superficial fascia, the fatty layer, the superficial fascia, the membranous layer, the transversalis fascia, extraperitoneal fascia, now let's move on to the weak places of the abdomen. Beginning with linea alba. Linea alba of the abdomen, the white line of the abdomen, is a compact connective tissue plate which stretches along the anterior middle line from the xiphoid process to the pubic symphysis. The linea alba is formed by crossing fibers of the aponeurosis of abdominal muscles. Umbilical ring. In the middle of the linea alba is the umbilical ring. This ring is occluded opening, which during the prenatal period is a passage for blood vessels that link the circulatory systems of the fetus and the mother. These vessels stop functioning after birth. Above the umbilicus, the linea alba is relatively wide, whereas towards the bottom, it narrows and becomes thicker. In an adult, its width varies between 2 to 4 cm. The Spagillian line or the semilunar line is a bilateral vertical curved line in the anterior abdominal wall where the layers of the rectus sheath fuse lateral to the rectus abdominis muscle and medial to the oblique muscles. The Walensky triangle. Superiorly it is limited by the costal arch. Medially it is limited by the lateral border of rectus abdominis, and inferiorly it is limited by the aponeurosis of internal oblique muscle. On the right Walensky triangle, there is a projection of gallbladder. The lumbar triangle. The lumbar triangle can refer to either the inferior lumbar triangle, which lies superficially, or the superior lumbar triangle, which is deep and superior to the inferior triangle. Of the two, the superior triangle is the more consistently found on cadavers and is more commonly the site of herniation. However, the inferior lumbar triangle is often simply called the lumbar triangle, perhaps owing to its superficial location and ease in demonstration. This is the superior lumbar triangle and this is the inferior lumbar triangle. Rectus sheath. Rectus sheath is found on either side of the linea alba of the abdomen. It serves as a casing for the rectus and pyramidal muscles of the abdomen. It is formed by the aponeurosis of the oblique and transverse abdominal muscles. It has an anterior layer and a posterior layer which have different structures. The inguinal canal. The inguinal canal is situated on both sides directly above the medial half of each inguinal ligament lateral of the rectus sheath. It is a narrow slit 4 to 6 cm long which passes obliquely down and medially through the anterior abdominal wall from the deep inguinal ring to the superficial inguinal ring. This canal is a passage for the testicular cord in men or the round ligament of uterus in women. The inguinal canal is the usual site for the formation of straight and oblique inguinal hernias. These are the walls of the inguinal canal. Superiorly, which is the roof, it is limited by the internal oblique and transversus abdominis muscle. Posteriorly, it is limited by the transversalis fascia and conjoint tendon. Anteriorly, it is limited by the aponeurosis of internal and external oblique muscle. And inferiorly, which is the floor, it is limited by the superior surface of the inguinal ligament. These are the links which were used to gather information for the making of this video. With this, I'll be ending my video. Thank you.